know that Ohio State's loaded up as always, and even more so in the portal with Caleb Downs leaving Alabama. That's going to sting for Bama fans. I don't care how well Kalen DeBoer's done in recruiting. He's done a great job. But Downs was just that special as a freshman. First freshman to lead Bama in tackles since 1970. But the hope is that you're bringing in Howard, who, if you want to do a numbers to numbers thing again here, which is kind of a good segue off of Aller, is that you can look at some Kyle McCord stuff and go, well, what was the problem with him? He was 24-6 split, completed 66% of his passes, throws for 3,000 plus yards. You saw those limitations, though, in some of those biggest moments. And I think at least with Howard, it's about the dual threat with him and the fact that you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but Howard feels like more of a baller. Like a guy that's just going to go out there and ball in a way that other guys aren't seeing the game at that position.
I totally agree. I think he's a perfect fit. By the way, Chip Kelly going to Ohio State, I think was one of the best offseason moves, like any head coaching or coordinator hire. I think it's really going to work well, especially because I don't think there's any sort of intimidation factor from Ryan Day, like worried he's going to try to take his job. I think it's his mentor, right? That's where he learned everything. There's video of him playing at New Hampshire, quarterback for him. This is his old coach, but I think Chip is like reinvigorated as well. Like he's got like this breath of fresh air with not having to worry about recruiting and going on the road. He can just worry about the offense. And Will Howard, I do think, is the style of play, being athletic. He can run. I think that's going to be what is going to surprise people, is how much more physical Ohio State's going to be on the offensive side of the ball. Like, I don't think this is going to be a CJ Stroud type of offense or even a Justin Fields. I think Will Howard's going to be a runner. I think you're going to see Travion and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield at the same time. I think there's going to be a lot of misdirection. I think it's going to be like, good luck stopping us. We're coming downhill. And I also think it limits Will Howard's exposure somewhat in the pass game, where he's not going to be relied on to throw for 4,000 yards. You're not going to need it. And I think he's going to be a much more consistent thrower. But to your point, like, I totally agree with you, because there's something about a check down Charlie where, like, you're asking that quarterback, come on, man, like, take a shot or two here or there, which I think is harder to teach and get a quarterback's mindset to change. Whereas if you get a gunslinger, somebody's a little bit more like a baller, like you described him, like, we're going to be good. There's going to be opportunities to make those plays. We just need to manage that risk a little bit better. I would rather have that style of quarterback every time. And I do think that's what Will Howard brings to the table. He also, I saw, I think it was Chip said the other day that he ran like 22 miles per hour, was the fastest player on the team in their offseason workouts. Like, he is a runner and he's big. He's like 240. They're going to be physical, which has been their biggest criticism. And I'm sure Ryan Day and every Ohio State fan has watched the way Michigan has run the Big Ten. And it was big criticism that Ryan Day had after they beat Notre Dame. He probably should have waited till after the season to start, pumping his chest about how physical they are. But I do think Ohio State's going to be way more physical this season.
I do wonder with some of the quarterbacks too, like where I'll watch, and you don't know, you'll have theories that pop in your head, but offenses have done such a great job of creating these advantages.
Yes.
And if you think of the way a kid now goes through the high school ranks, the camps, and I'm not turning this into like an AAU for football thing, but I wonder if everything is so programmed with some of these top talents that then when it becomes that freelance part of it, and, needing somebody to kind of just like play with a little less fear. I wonder if that's something that that's happening, that we're seeing now with some of these younger quarterbacks, where it's like, as soon as I'm off schedule now, I'm totally lost, despite being one of the top overall recruits and putting up all these ridiculous numbers and having all of these physical gifts, because in some of these offenses be like, okay, this is the read. It's this read, and then it's this read, and then we're done. Like, don't even think about looking at the other side of the field, or you're not even going to get to your third option, or you're not going to have, or we're always going to have an advantage on this route, because again, with Ohio State, their teams were always just so much better than the majority of everybody they're going to play, other than Michigan. So I wonder if that's part. And like, look, with Howard, I'm not going to worry about that with him at all. I just wonder if that's the case with some of these other guys that come in with huge profiles, but actually can't think the game in a way that you need them to.
offense always has had the advantage. I mean, that's been the case for the last 20 years, and probably even more so since the implementation of the RPO and how it's just everything favors the offense. But the offensive minds and the innovation that have come in there, like exactly what you're talking about, a lot of these quarterbacks, they don't have to get through their first option because the first option is wide open. Like the offensive minds and the way they've scouted and they start getting things and they dial up shot plays. Like I remember getting shot plays called up where we were going to take a shot and it was like, we hope this post comes wide open, and it would hit maybe, 40% of the time, or else you'd have to get your check down. But now it feels like the shot plays, the chunk plays, they're scheming guys wide open all the time. And kind of going back to the Will Howard, last year, we're talking about Drew Aller, Kyle McCord. Again, saw those two players in person. The difference in that game was Marvin Harrison Jr. was schemed open a couple. Now, he's incredible. You don't have to scheme him open. But he got open a couple wide open times. Kyle McCord hit him like first read, and they ended up winning the game because of a couple big plays to Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, that's what you're talking about. The one thing that has me a little bit concerned, have you seen what, and this is the case for two schools, where Chris Kleiman, the head coach of Kansas State, he's alluded to the fact that if Will Howard would have come back, he wouldn't have beat out Avery Johnson, which is interesting. Like, why didn't you want to bring him back? And then there's also this fact, maybe he doesn't want to admit that they got outbid. There's also that. But he did.
You also could just be talking up your guy that's in-house too.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
He might be telling the truth, but I've also heard every coach spin everything to their advantage at some point anyway. So I don't know what to make. Like, I've started reading less previews because I just can't do it anymore.
But I go back to last
all of
season.
These previews. Go ahead.
There was a stretch last year at Kansas State where Will Howard, I remember doing this, like he almost got benched. Now, almost is relative. He got hurt. Avery Johnson came in, kind of lit it up. And then Kleiman was like, we're going to split series this game. And then, like, he never played, like, he didn't play any more meaningful snaps. So Will Howard kind of put it to bed, like, pretty quickly. But I did think that was interesting that they were that bullish on Avery Johnson. But as Ohio State fans pointed out, like, Joe Burrow was at Ohio State and wasn't playing. And, and then it worked out pretty well for LSU. Like, you could, one man's trash might be another one's treasure. And I think Will Howard is going to be helped tremendously with the talent that he's around and the system that he's in.